There are three ways to build wealth. The first is investing in equities, like stocks and bonds. The second is building a business, which is the hardest, and the third is investing in real estate. The reason real estate investing is so lucrative in this country is because you can shelter tax. And one of the most popular ways that you can shelter tax is through something called the 1031 exchange. Today I'm going to go over the 5 things you need to know in order to do a 1031 correctly, and that way you can pay less money to the IRS. We're going to go over what a 1031 is, how do they work, common mistakes people make, time limits that you have to be concerned about, and what properties you can and cannot do 1031s with. Here we go. What is a 1031? A 1031 is when you have an investment property that you've been holding on to, and then you go ahead and you sell this property and you take that money and put it into a new investment property. If you do that the right way, you do not have to pay tax on the money you make off the original investment. A perfect example, I buy an investment property for $100,000. I hold on to it for about 10 years. Then I decide to sell that property for $300,000. Normally you'd pay tax on $200,000, but if I can take that money and put it into a new investment property, I defer the tax until a later time when I sell the brand new investment property. How do these things work? In order for you to do a 1031 successfully, what you need to do is you need to take the proceeds of the original property and put it into a new investment property. But in order to do that, there's a very important rule, which is you cannot touch the money on transfer when you're moving it from the old property to the new property. You have to use something called a qualified intermediary. That is basically an escrow company that holds your money in escrow and moves it from the sale of the first investment property to the new investment property. If you touch the money or commingle the money with any of your own personal funds, your 1031 is busted, which means you are gonna end up paying the tax. You don't know the number of people that have called me that have sold their property and then they say, hey, I wanna do a 1031 exchange. And I said, well, where'd the money go? And they go, oh, it's sitting in my bank account. I go, is it commingled with all your other personal money? And they say, yeah, it is. I'm like, sorry, your 1031 is busted. You can never ever commingle your money when you're doing a 1031 exchange. It has to go from the original property to the qualified intermediary, from the qualified intermediary straight to the new property. It's really important when you do a 1031 that you talk to your realtors, your CPA, and the qualified intermediary before the process gets started. Because they're gonna tell you all the things you need, and they're gonna tell you what you need to do in order to make the 1031 work and you don't accidentally bust it and pay the tax. So this is one of the most common mistakes people make, and make sure you don't make that mistake. The second mistake that people make often with 1031s is they don't understand the timelines. There are 2 time limits that you need to be aware of when you're doing 1031s. The first one is the 45-day rule, and the second one is the 180-day rule. The 45-day rule says that after you sell the original property, you have 45 days to identify the new property that you're gonna put the money into for your investment to avoid the tax. And the qualified intermediary has you list what those properties are. And so what I see a lot of my clients do is they'll go and identify 2 or maybe even 3 properties, because if they only name 1 property within the 45 days and they can't close on that property, their 1031 is busted and they have to pay the tax. So make sure you know what property you're getting, and make sure you list a few of them in case the first property that you really want doesn't go through. The second rule is a 180-day rule, which is basically 6 months. You have 6 months to close on your new property. So if you're not able to close that property within 6 months, the 1031 gets busted. So remember those 2 rules: 45 days to identify the property, and then 6 months to close on the new property. The 5th important thing that you need to worry about is what kind of properties can I do 1031s with? The IRS tends to be pretty liberal when it comes to the different type of properties you can do 1031s for. You can do land to a multifamily, you can do a multifamily to a commercial. In that realm, they're very liberal. They'll allow you to do almost any type of investment to investment when they say like kind. But the one property you cannot do a 1031 with is your personal home. You're not allowed to take your private home that you live in, do a 1031 and shelter that tax money into an investment property. But luckily for us, the IRS has a different rule for you to shelter tax money for your private home. And that is, if you've lived in your primary residence for 2 out of 5 years, you don't pay tax on the first $250,000 of gain. And if you're married, that jumps up to $500,000. Another common mistake that people don't understand about 1031s is the government wants you in a worse off position when you're buying the new investment property. What does that mean, the government wants you in a worse off position? What they mean is when you go from your old property to the new property, they want you to either have A, taken out a larger loan, or B, put up more money to get the new investment property. I've had clients come to me that have had a big commercial property and they've had a huge loan on the property. And they say, yeah, I want to do a 1031 and I want to sell this property and take the proceeds and get a bunch of small rentals, but they're all paid off. Well, guess what? In that case, you go from a lot of debt to no debt, and you're in a better off position. In order for you not to pay any tax and make the 1031 work, the government always wants you in a worse off position. More debt or put more money up. As a recap, 1031s are amazing because it allows you to defer your tax into a future date. And so the things you need to keep in mind when you're doing a 1031, it goes from an old investment property you're selling to a new one. You take that money and you have to take it and put it with a qualified intermediary. You cannot touch the money or commingle it in your personal fund. Make sure that you're in a worse off position, which means you're either taking out more debt or you're putting up more money. Make sure you don't mess up the 45-day rule and the 180-day rule, which means you have to identify the new property within 45 days and close on the new property within 6 months, 180 days. And make sure that it's like-kind property, investment property to other investment property, i.e., you cannot use your personal home or vacation home to do a 1031. If you have any other questions, leave comments below. Thanks.